Well, hi. It looks like we're on our way to start something, and I promised that these little devotional thoughts would be short, and so they will. We want to look at an event in the life of Jesus this morning. The very first thing that he did after he was baptized is he went out into the wilderness. Before he had crowds following him, before he had picked disciples, before he had started his ministry, he went out into the wilderness for 40 days, the Bible says, and he was tested by the devil. There were three temptations, and one of them was to make bread out of stones. And Jesus was hungry, so that would have been a temptation. The other one, the devil took him up until the top of the temple and said, jump off, and let's see if God catches you. And then the third one was the devil offered him everything he could dream of in the world if he would just bow down and worship him. We'll talk about each one of those temptations later and how that gives us insight into who Jesus was. But the first thing I want us to look at is what I see is that Jesus said no. He said no to the devil each time. It didn't matter what it was, but he said no, N-O. And so I want to illustrate that. I have a pencil, right? A pencil. And I have some sand. And so I'm going to pour my sand out here on this. And okay, I've got sand. I have a pencil. And so Jesus said no. And so how do I illustrate that? I drew a line in the sand. How often do we use that phrase? This is my line in the sand. I don't cross over it, or I dare you to cross over it, or you've gone too far. Those kinds of things. The very fact that Jesus drew a line in the sand is important. He said no, 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 no. Our country, the United States, is built on the mantra that says, all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, such as, and then it goes on to list. And I guess that's all good, but that means you can do whatever you want as long as it really doesn't interfere with anyone else. We have lost the ability to discern right and wrong. Even in the Christian community, we read our Bible, which we claim is our basis for faith and practice, and that we say, well, this is what it means to me. Listen, folks, it only means what God meant it to mean. It means either everybody's wrong, one person's right, not everybody can be right, right? We've lost the ability to draw lines, to tell when thing is really right or wrong. And Jesus thought it was important to draw those lines. So if anything about his personality that I need to adopt is the thought that there are lines that can be drawn, and they're absolute lines that are not crossable. But then, on the other hand, listen to this. One of the biggest dangers in following Jesus is drawing lines. Religion, Christianity over the last couple of thousand years has drawn many lines in inappropriate places. Places Jesus wouldn't have drawn the lines. We've used the Bible to prove things that the lines should be there when they really shouldn't. I don't know, maybe some of us had a good heart, really meant to do well. Others, for their own gain and personal profit, drew some lines. And that's where we got lines. When I was a kid, there were lines for young people, even adults, but it was like, don't play with playing cards, don't go to movies. If you were a youth, we couldn't have mixed swimming in a swimming pool. It had to be just boys or just girls. Let's see, don't gamble, don't smoke, don't drink. Someone had drawn lines. A couple of years ago, I visited a church and that I wasn't a part of. I was just visiting to see what churches were in Lake County where I live. And this one pastor was on a tirade about Santa Claus and how that Christians shouldn't follow Santa Claus and believe in Santa Claus because it misleads every generation into thinking that God is like Santa Claus. I don't know if he made that up on his own or heard somebody say it, but that's an example of a line that was being drawn. So, out of this one thing, this one devotional thought today is that Jesus drew lines. And it's appropriate for us to know that we can draw lines and that we should draw lines and that there are some things that are not compromisable. And Jesus knew the difference. Remember, they came to Jesus and Peter, and they said, Peter, you and your teacher pay the temple tax, don't they? Or don't you? And Peter said, well, sure. And then he went to Jesus and says, we do pay the temple tax, right? And Jesus said, basically, well, we're exempt. But he says, well, let's don't offend them. You go down to the lake, throw in a hook, the first fish you catch, there'll be some money inside, and you go pay our temple tax. And you say, well, Jesus didn't draw the line. No, Jesus knew when it was appropriate. But he did know there were lines to be drawn, and he drew them. We should draw lines, but we should do so carefully and humbly, because upon such lines, religion is built. And religion that offends, and religion that hurts, and religion that misappropriates itself and assumes a place in our lives that it was never meant to have. Remember, I called religion the accessorization or the accoutrements that are applied to a relationship. Okay, have some time to think about that. Have a great day, okay? Bye-bye.